As I Am podcast with RaenetteLee. This is your host, RaenetteLee, and today we're going to talk about my struggle with trusting God and His promises and just being patient for His promises. So, I am going to give you like a brief testimony on when I got married and when I made the decision out of alignment with God to get married. So, about 5, 6 years ago now, let me say this was 2015. uh 2015. And I just remember feeling very, very lonely. I remember just feeling like I knew I wasn't ready for marriage, really. I just wanted it so badly, um that I forced myself to be ready for marriage by not being ready, but I just forced myself in a marriage, even though he did ask me. Initially, I kind of knew it wasn't the best idea because we had history together before, and the history was pretty rocky, pretty toxic, pretty much shouldn't have been a marriage. And I just felt really lonely at that time, and I just was kind of ready to marry anybody, and we had enough chemistry, enough. Um, what I really liked about him is how much we could talk, which later on changed, and I think I told you guys about that in the first episode a little bit, and um, that all changes when they're not for you. You know what I mean? Everything you love about a person changes when they're really not meant for you, and you just kind of force a marriage to happen. And I knew that God had somebody else. Well, actually, I didn't know. I didn't know that God had someone else for me or planned for me. I didn't trust that He could have the perfect person in His eyes for me, because I never thought I could be the perfect person. And I never thought I could get there. I was always chasing perfection, and I always felt like I had to be perfect for God's best for me. And that's one thing that I'm learning now in my walk with God, especially this recent walk with God that I've had, because I'm telling you, I'm like the prodigal child times 3,000. Like, I came to God, left, came to God, left. And I've always left for friends. I've always left for uh, relationship, people. It's always been people. You know what I mean? It's always been people. It's never been a career. It's never been anything like that where I've gotten unaligned with God. It's always been people. And where was I going with that? So His promise on marriage for me, I never really trusted that it would ever come. So I kind of forced a person to be that person for me, and you can never do that. Like, you can never force God's best for you. You have to wait on God, because like I said, the first episode, and I'll just link it below because, might as well, like the first episode about, the fear of being alone. And that's what was driving me, a fear that I'll always be alone, instead of trusting that God need to work on me first. And that marriage did kind of help me a lot to see the things that I didn't understand. Like, I lack boundaries. Like, I have a thing where I kind of feel like a person should just know. And that relationship taught me that absolutely not. You got to lay out all the foundation, and a person can and cannot accept it. And that was the thing. I was so afraid of being alone that I also had a fear of abandonment. So as he didn't accept it, I was fearing that he would abandon me. And it's okay for someone to abandon you. Sometimes, like they said, somebody's rejection is God's protection. And now I welcome abandonment. Like, it hurts, but at the same time, I'd rather I'd rather it hurt for you to leave than for you to hurt me and you're still there. Like, you don't need to be in my life. Like, goodbye. That goes for friendships. That goes for family. That goes for everybody. At this point, I do not care. Okay? Goodbye, deuces. All right. But anyway, so I forced that marriage to happen because I didn't trust God's promise for me that it would come through, because I didn't understand the process that I would have to go in. And that's one of the things that kind of stops a lot of us from having trust in God's promises, is because we're not feeling like we're be good enough for it. Another one is not trusting his timing. Because if you get it, like, one thing I was saying, because right now I'm speaking about relationships, but it's the same with careers and everything. Like, I kind of didn't understand and trust his promise for my career too, when I kind of talk about that. Starting this podcast is one for me, and I don't know where this podcast is going to go, and I'm perfectly okay with it going nowhere as long as I can have a catalog for my daughter to look at. But one of the things that, oh, what was I saying? I'll be getting off topic. So anyway, with relationships, his timing is the right timing, because we may not have all this equipped for it. So you're impatient with God because he's not giving you the man you want, right? And we talked about that in the first episode. It's kind of going back to the first episode now, I'm kind of thinking of it. But with relationships and trusting God's promise for you. But you may not be ready, right? And you may think you're ready just because you have this strong desire, and your fear of loneliness and being alone for the rest of your life drives it. So and so you make things happen, right? Or maybe the person that you're supposed to have, maybe God sent you something, and then you're like not trusting that God's going to do it in his timing. So you force everything. And because you're not ready, you drive that person away. And then your toxicities bounce off each other. Because initially, if you're in a toxic relationship, it's probably a small percentage of people that are actually healthy in a toxic relationship. So you have unhealthy parts to you too. It may not be as diabolical as other people's, but you still have things that you should have worked on, to where you can even pinpoint right away where a toxic trait is, and not fall into a pattern with them, like just fall into a relationship where you're both going toxic to toxic, or taking their toxicity, and yeah, that's one of them, with why you should definitely have more faith in God's promises and not try to make them just happen. And with the relationships that I have been in, they've basically been me with tired of being lonely. And I can tell you now that I don't think I was lonely for that long. This is probably the longest that I've been single, which is technically 3 years, because I tried to get into a relationship. It was a situationship right after my marriage turned into a 2-month relationship. So I don't know if you want to count that, but if not, I've basically been single for 4 years, and this is the longest I've been single. And for me, it's been kind of easier in trusting God's promises, just because I've seen what it's done when I didn't, and I tried to make it happen, or I've gotten upset with God or something because it wasn't going in the timing that I wanted, so I chose on my own. And when I've done that, I've been hurt every time. Like, I've been so hurt that there were moments where I felt like I was going crazy, that I was having anxiety attacks. I was having so many depressive moments because the rejection that I was feeling from trying to make someone that person that God had for me, And in that, I realized that it's so much better to sit alone in my desert period and just wait for the people, including friendships and all that, to come into my life rather than go pick them and choose them, And it has been better the last couple months. I have definitely not had the strongest last couple months, but I can tell you I just got off of my David fast, and there was a lot revealed to me about people in my life, and there was some things that I realized that I needed to kind of clear my space of. And I'm, trusting God more than ever, because when I don't trust Him and I just trust myself, I haven't really made the best choices. And I'm really loving trusting God right now. Like, I'm loving it. And sometimes it's hard to, because it doesn't look like we're what we I ideally see our life going. Um, but when we don't, all we do is blame ourselves. I mean, all we can do is blame ourselves when we don't trust God, because that's the choice that we're making. Also, when we do make the choice too, but because He still gives you a choice regardless of the instructions He has for you. Um, but my path in trusting God has been, man, so many, like, I feel like I was the seed that was thrown, um I don't know, like, kind of thrown on the pavement, for a while, where I didn't grow. I heard the message, I felt the Holy Spirit, I had a connection to God to where I could never deny Him. But my trust in Him is something that I surely am just now developing. I don't think I really ever trusted God, even though I've always been a woman who would never, I would never deny God. Like, the things He's done in my life, I would never deny Him. I had a moment maybe when I was in college where I kind of questioned if He existed, but yeah, and I think it was mostly just me, in who I was being connected to spiritually. And that's me saying it in a nice way, but who I was connected to, because who you're intimate with, that also kind of affects how you see God. You start to kind of think like how they think, if you notice, in your intrusive thinking, happens. And that's the spirit that's attaching to you, because that's what intimacy does. But anyways, back to what I was saying. Trusting God for me has been one of the hardest things about my walk with God. Like, I am definitely a prodigal child. I definitely am one of those people who is very rebellious, even as a child. You know what I mean? I've always kind of had a very independent thinking, and so that's what I think has made it pretty hard for me to trust God as much, because I'm like trying to just trust my own judgment instead of listening to the discernment that God gave me. Because I'm telling you, when I say that God's given me so much discernment, even when I was getting married, I remember I had so much anxiety that I probably lost 5+ pounds because I couldn't eat. Like, I was like, I'm already skinny, and when I tell you, like, there was barely a butt there was barely a butt there. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like what you call slim thick, so I have something back there, but then I didn't have nothing back there, okay? Because I lost so much weight with being so, having so much anxiety, because it was me going against the discernment, and the gift guy gave me a discernment, and trying to make my own choices. Like, I had prayed for this discernment. I prayed for a lot of spiritual gifts that I then went against, because I wanted to live my own life. And I think a lot of it comes from my childhood of not having, I don't know how to explain it, because some people might find it offensive, but it's the truth. I've never really had a friend for a very long time, and the one time I did, later on they treated me like a stranger. And so I've never really had a friend who I've taken with life, straight with life, or even I've never really had a long drawn out relationship. I think the longest relationship that I had was 4 years. My marriage was only a 3 year relationship, 3.5 year relationship, 2.5 year marriage. And four is like the most. And then the rest of relationships have been so on and off. So there's never been stability relationship wise in my life. So a lot of the times I've chosen people, friends, relationships, like romantic relationships, over God because I always felt alone. I remember the moment when I found God. I was in college. Well, technically, I was a senior in high school, and that set me apart. You know what I mean? Because at that point, everybody was sleeping around. Everybody was they was drunk as heck in the school. You know what I mean? They was doing lean. They was doing everything, and here I am, just strictly listening to the gospel music. That's another thing, because at that time they were saying that all the artists was in the Illuminati, and that scared me because the situation happened. And maybe later on God will lead me to tell you what happened, to where I was like, oh, God is real. The spiritual world is real. Jesus, that name holds power. Yeshua holds power. Okay. And something happened where I just really went hard trying to be the best I could for God, and it set me apart. Like I kind of became a little bit what people would call lame. Like I really didn't want to do this, do that. And then when I got in college and I started to I lost my V card. That all like changed, and then I just went down a path where whatever, but it was a lot of guilt in it from losing it when I had already told God I'd wait till marriage, and at that time there was a strong loneliness when that happened and before that happened, and I was settling once again with settling to have people in my life because it was just so lonely. And I always feared going back to that loneliness. And coming from a large household of 7, it's so weird to go from a lot of people around me, even if they're not always around me, because I did have my own room, when I was a senior in high school. But anyway, coming from a house of 7 and already having loneliness issues and abandonment issues, I went into having nobody. And the only, like, even females really didn't want to hang out with me like that. Even though I had 4 roommates, they really didn't mess with me like that. It was like one of the girls, like, I mostly have been around black people, so I gravitate towards mostly black people. So I had a Guatemalan roommate and a white roommate and a black roommate, and me and the black roommate were next to each other. But she had her boyfriend there all the time, so she was in her own world. She had her own friends, and like I said, I never really carried friends with me. You know what I mean? Those friends usually have their own friends, and that's the friends that they're mostly always with, and that they have their own best friends and stuff. And then there is me, who a lot of times I have been alone, and I hated being alone then. You know what I mean? Now I welcome it, but then I hated being alone, and I had a heavy codependency issue, And side note, I was just listening to somebody who was talking about this same thing today, which helped me understand why God has probably been trying to separate me, get me alone, because of my codependency issue. And if you know and learned about codependency, that means you tend to gravitate people towards people that have problems, so that they will be dependent on you, because you're dependent on them to be there, no matter how messed up they are. And when it feels like they don't need you, you feel like you're worth nothing, So anyways, I had a strong loneliness, you know what I mean? And so then that led to me seeking out men, you know what I mean? Or boys at that time, because, we just getting older, you know what I mean? We just becoming grown, and they was boys, little boys. It led to me seeking out boys. And, at that time, I was still very much so. I had my V card, and I allowed myself to be put in compromising situations, and I lost my V card. And it wasn't to anybody who at the time was even, it wasn't a meaningful loss. It really wasn't. And that sent me down an even more further rough path. And although later on we did love each other, and it was an on and off again in a relationship, it still made me feel even more lonely, because me and this person, we didn't even have anything in common besides the fact that I lost my V card to him. And I remember he said, "Is that all?" or whatever. And basically, that is nothing. That's, how do I put it? There's a lot of people in this world where the the V card doesn't mean much to them, and it's mostly men, but even women. And so it meant really nothing to them. You know what I mean? But it meant a lot to me, and it's because I had a strong conviction already about it. But I had always struggled with lust. I've been struggling with lust since I was probably 4, literally. Like, there was situations that happened where I was little, and anyway, I struggled with that. So that was, it almost felt like inevitable to happen, where I went down a path where feeling lonely and feeling like, why, if I'm connected to you, God, do I feel so empty? I didn't even know what to pray about then. You know what I mean? And the thing about it is, one thing I realized is sometimes we're mad about the promise not coming to fruition, and it's probably just us. We probably need to learn how to pray. We probably need to learn what we're seeking. We probably need to learn what we need to work on within ourselves, and just have patience and allow God to work in us. And because we live in a microwave society, we expect everything to just happen. And that is where trusting God's promises kind of is hard to do, because everything is usually so here, and it happens so quickly that it's very hard to trust God's promises. Um, and patience is key in trusting God's promises, because that's part of love. Love is patience. If you love God, you have to have patience with His process. Patience with His process. And everything doesn't have to always happen. As long as you're still living, you still have so much more to do. You still have so much to give on this earth. So although it's not happening right now, and you feel like basically God's forgotten about you, I'm here to tell you he has not. He's working on you. Just allow Him to work deep in you, because some of us have been through some dark things, and the enemy wants to use those dark things to control you and to make it seem like God's forgotten about you, but He has not. And God's trying to use those dark things that's happening to you to help other people who have had the same things happen to them, and to uplift them. But He has to heal you from them dark things first. So that is why it's important to trust in the promise, have patience in the promise, and to allow Him to take you through the process. Just the same in every walk of life. Like, I feel so bad that I wanted to have a child so quickly, because I have not been patient with her. I've not showed her what real love looks like, because I didn't heal first. And I wish I would have trusted in God. But because I went ahead of Him and I made it happen, she is here now, and I don't regret her whatsoever. But I have to pray even more diligently to even heal some of the things I've already done to her. You know what I mean? And I'm not beating my child or anything, but the thing about it is, You don't have to physically put your hands on your child to hurt them. There's things that I needed to work on before I had a child that I didn't work on. That if I would have trusted in God's promise and his process for me, I would have worked on it and then had a kid. And then also, I wouldn't have put a dad hurting her, because then I would have picked the right guy to be the father. You know what I mean? And there's no shade or tea towards him. It's just, there's things I've seen that I like, really, it hurts me to see her like that. You know what I mean? But that's one of the things that I wanted to just talk about, is just trusting in God's promise, because when we don't, it causes chaos when we choose it on our own. You know what I mean? And although it's taking a long time, trust in his promise, trust in his process. You want to feel peace when you start a good, something that you know you're meant to do. You want to feel peace when you get into a relationship you know you meant to be in. And life is already hard enough. Why make it harder by choosing the wrong partner or the wrong career to go for, or the wrong whatever you're trusting in the promise that you're waiting on? You know what I mean? So that's pretty much all I have to say about that, and I'm pretty sure this isn't as long as it usually is, but I wrote a couple things down. I'm going to start like making a notepad, because let me tell you, I wrote it down on my phone and I'm recording it from my phone. So the two don't go together, you know. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. And like, subscribe, share. I do have my TikTok that I'm gonna be posting on. It's AsIAmwithRaenetteLee, spelled the same. And follow my Instagram as well, AsIAmwithRaenetteLee. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching once again. And this is my first recording I did with an actual face recognition. Just my face is actually here. So my brother told me, hey, I would like to see your face. Well, here I am. Thank you guys so much. Mwah. Thank you for the support, the love. I am immensely grateful for any support I get. I really am. And yeah, make sure you turn on your notification bell, like, subscribe, and share.